You're tuned into the Borth podcast, the place where clarity replaces confusion and real conversations open new doors for your financial life. Let's dive in and rethink what's possible.
Hello, and welcome back to the Borth podcast. Today, we're going to be diving into what I think is it's a bit of a, I don't want to call it a book review. I'm going to use Robert Kiyosaki's book called The Cashflow Quadrant. Today, we're going to talk about this a little bit because there's so much good information here. And again, if you haven't read this book, and most people have read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which was a great book, by the way. But I love this book because it really puts in perspective how we think about money, and in probably a little bit different way than you're used to. So sit back, relax. We're going to talk about, Robert Kiyosaki's book, The Cashflow Quadrants, and how the idea of banking plays into it. So, and this is really a conversation I love to have because people have read this book, they get this idea, but I also want people to understand that the part that he doesn't talk about, that's the beauty of this thing. What isn't he not talking about? And not that I think he omits it. I know he doesn't omit it on purpose. It's just something that as individuals, we do these things. We do things in lives that we don't even think about. We do things in life without even giving it a second thought. And so part of what we're going to talk about today is like giving this book a second thought, putting a little bit more perspective to it, and just putting this idea out there. If once we understand this, we choose not to take action, the question is why. Again, it's kind of been a common theme in my language lately is what is the consequence of inaction? And so we're going to talk about that a little bit today. So again, if you're watching this on YouTube, thank you so much. If you're listening to this just as a podcast, thank you so much. I'd ask that you like and share and do all those things that my marketing guy tells me to do, is like do some self-promotion. I'm not very good at it. I just like to get up and share my ideas and what's important to me. And I think people will naturally hear it. But I also understand in the world we live in, there's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of misconceptions out there. So the best way to drown out misinformation is with more proper information. So I think that's where I approach this from. So again, like, share, subscribe, do all those fun things that you're supposed to be doing. And so to Mike, there's the shout out there to get things done correctly. And let's dive into this. So if you can see on the screen, if you're watching this, I'll try to describe it to people if they're driving and listening to this. Robert Kiyosaki had this idea that there's 4 different types of people in the money game, right? And he called them the cash flow quadrants. There's employees, there's self-employed, there's a business owner, and there's the investor. And so the idea is that, the employee, is they have a job, right? So if we think about that in the upper left-hand corner, this idea that we have a job and we go to somebody else's business, we work for them, we bring talent to them, they pay us money. That's nothing wrong with that. That's, majority of people out there are doing that. But some of them go, I want to be self-employed. And so that's in the left-hand corner and the bottom left-hand corner of the quadrants, right? So the employees in the upper left-hand, the self-employed is in the lower left-hand corner. And this is typically what we call you own a job. If you read his book, I'll have you go read his book because it's pretty interesting. He doesn't really hold back on people that are self-employed. He says you have kind of the worst of both worlds. You own your job or own a job. So you work longer hours, you take all the risk, and you probably make about the same amount of money. But you don't necessarily even have the freedom that you think you're going to want when you start a job. Where his point is like if you can develop systems and process and move this from the left side of the quadrant to the right side of the quadrant is where you're going to start to find value. Which means I'm going to move this into a business. I'm going to be a business owner. And there's some things that is required to be a business owner. I'm not going to go into that today. I'm going to touch on the part that he doesn't talk about. So if you want to read more about this, feel free to go read his book. Love to have a future conversation with any one of you that's listening. Reach me at wade@sagewealthstrategy.com or wade@factandfinancial.com. Or, there's a lot of different ways. If you're on Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever it is, you can reach me. But we can talk about the book and have an understanding of what this means. But the idea is that we want to move over to being a business owner. Why is that so important? Why is it so important to be a business owner? Because you don't own a job. Now you've moved to the right side of the quadrant and you own a system and people work for you. So now they're supporting you. You're paying them money to come bring some talent that is valuable to you. And now you own a business. This allows you some freedom to, maybe not engage with your business for 6 months, 2 weeks, whatever it is, and your business doesn't stop. That's the real definition of a business. If you can step away and your business continues to run, now you truly have a business. The next quadrant, the lower right-hand quadrant on the on the right-hand side there in the lower spot, you own investments and money works for you. So you either have a people working for you on the right-hand side of the quadrants here. You either have people working for you or you have money working for you. And so think about that from a perspective. It's like, own a job. When you first get started, a lot of times you're trying to find knowledge and understanding, develop a skill set so you'll be an employee, and then you'll eventually move maybe to a self-employed. But if you really understand how it works, you want to move from a self-employed where you own a job to you own a system. And then when you own a system, at the same time, maybe you can own investments. And those investments are providing passive income. So typically there's a progression here. But the part that he doesn't talk about that I'm really excited about sharing with you is this idea of who did he forget in this equation? Who did Robert Kiyosaki, probably one of the most read financial books out there, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, who did he forget in the equation? This guy called a banker, gal called a banker, person called a banker, right? Whatever you want to do. And what do I mean by banker? I don't mean, well, sometimes it's traditional banking, but I'm going to take it maybe to a lot higher level. The person providing liquidity. That's what I'm talking about when I say banker. Who's the person as an employee, as a self-employed person, as a business owner, as an investor, all need somebody to help them provide liquidity. Because you think about it, right? As an employee, what am I, I need something, or I want something more accurately. I want something. So I'm going to trade future income to get it today. But I can't do that unless somebody can provide me liquidity to go buy a car, for example, a house, whatever it might be. That's typically the banker. How does the banker do? They usually do pretty well. What if I'm self-employed, right? I'm going to go out on my own. First 2 years, I might not make any money. I have this dream. I'm going to make it work. I'm going to be a restaurateur or whatever it might be. I'm going to start a business. I want to be self-employed. You're trading future cash flow, but somebody has to provide you liquidity to make that happen. Who is that? That's a banker. Again, not traditional. A lot of times it's traditional Wells Fargo. My feelings about Wells Fargo or any other traditional bank. But there's a lot of other people that can be your banker. You might have a rich relative. I know a gentleman, his aunt gave him the ability to start buying some real estate, taught him what he needed to know about real estate, had all the cash. He just went and sourced the deals. That was his banker, right? This is the mentality I think a lot of people miss because they think it's difficult. They think it's hard. It's really not. It just takes some education. Again, we talk about in a lot of our seminars, we talk about, you first have to have awareness, then educate yourself, and then take action. So right now we're talking about awareness, education, and I'm going to give you the ability to take some action. Again, business owners, let's talk about that real quick. Does a business ever need money? Any business, right? Does General Electric need money? Yeah, they float what's called a bond, and they put the bond out on the open marketplace, and average investors now become their banker. Think about that for a second. They could go to Wells Fargo, they could go to Chase, they could go to Goldman Sachs. They go to a lot of different places and get access to money. Absolutely can. But a lot of times they go to the open market and say, hey, who wants to buy this 20-year bond at 5 or 6%? And you trust that they're going to pay it back, and you give them your dollars, your money, and they're paying you back the principal plus the interest. You are a banker. That's a banking function. You provide a liquidity to General Electric. They say, thank you very much. They take that and they go make, jet engines or whatever General Electric does, right? So they do a lot of different things. But my point is, the person providing liquidity is actually the person that's really in a banking function. The next one, the lower right-hand corner, the investor. This is the one that I find really interesting. Investors have become very creative about where they're sourcing their money. Because a lot of times, traditional banks, the Wells Fargos and the Chases of the world, they don't have a clue about, somebody's investment idea. They don't, they're a lot of times they're clueless when it comes to understanding what people are doing to make money. And they're making enough that they don't really need to go into this marketplace. So you find very specialized banks or very specialized institutions that will provide liquidity to investors at a big level. Did anybody see Jeff Bezos' vision of Amazon? No. Some people did, but most traditional banking institutions did not see what he was doing or where it was going to go, right? So you got to go out and find other sources of capital, other sources of money. Let's not call it capital. Let's just call it money. But that person that helped get Amazon up off the ground was a banker. Now, it could have been his grandma. I don't know where he got the money. I guess I haven't researched that, but it could have been his grandma who had, $10,000 and said, "Here, little Jeffy, go build that little bookstore you're going to build." Right. But that was his banker, person that provided the liquidity. So why am I even talking about this? Right. So this is the why. Question is, do you just want to be the business owner? Do you just want to be the self-employed person? Do you just want to be the employee or the investor? Or if you understood that being the banker in all these situations to serve you, to serve other people, can be very lucrative and actually very easy to understand, but it takes some time. You can become the banker. You can take control of the banking function in all those different areas, all those different quadrants. Again, you're probably going to be your own first customer, but eventually you're going to find out that there are other people that want liquidity, that want capital. Your liquidity can provide them capital. And when you understand that's money working for you, then that's when you really start to grow your net worth and your wealth. We talk about wealth all the time. What does being wealthy mean? It's like when you're not having to work for your money and your money's working for you, that's truly wealth. And now it's just degrees of how big that is. Are you making $1 million doing it? Are you making $1,000? Where are you at in that process to grow to whatever amount you need to provide all the, to have that passive income to pay for all your expenses on a yearly basis? That's financial freedom. That's what Robert Kiyosaki says is winning the money game. So the idea is like, how do we create this banking function? Again, I know there's a lot of people out there that they want to make it something sexy, something fancy. They're going to argue against me. That's all fine. I'm just talking about this idea of like, if I can create a pool of money and I understand how the money game works, and I can now go and turn around and provide the banking function, again, not banking, but the banking function of providing liquidity to somebody else, they're willing to pay me for the use of my money. I mean, how much easier really does that get once you have, if you have a $100 bill and somebody's willing to pay you $110 in 10 days because they want to use that $100 bill? That's banking function at its finest. That's really all we're talking about. It doesn't have to be any more complicated than that. The complicated part is that you have to have the understanding of how that works. You have to have the awareness that you can actually do this, and you can. And you have to say, now, what is it going to take? And the courage to say, now I'm going to go create my pool of money, and then I'm going to go find people that need access to capital, need access to money, and I'm going to give that to them, but it's going to be for a cost. That's really all we're talking about when we talk about this idea of becoming your own banker. But more importantly, not just becoming your own banker, becoming everybody else's banker too. Why not? There's a lot of people that need access to cash that they can't go to Wells Fargo and get it, or they might be able to go there and get it, but it's so dang expensive that maybe you can offer it at a better rate. That's an opportunity, right? Go where your competition's not. That's how you make money. That's how you grow wealth. The idea of wealth is, again, having somebody else pay your bills because they need something that you have. And if that's cash, then let's understand how to properly structure it, where to properly store it, how to properly distribute it, and how to properly, have it come back to you. And that's the conversation we can have, right? That's where we can bring tremendous value. We have all the structure, all the process set out. If you want to know how that works, give us a call. We can definitely help you understand how all that flows, and we can structure it. And once you have it, and once you're engaged with it, you're going to say, well, why isn't everybody else doing this? Or more importantly, a lot of people ask me that all the time. It's like, well, this is so great. Why isn't everybody else doing this? Well, I'm telling you, they are. They just don't talk about it because, again, why would they? Why would you want to bring more competition? You don't invite competition, right? You don't invite, competition to your party. You're like, hey, you got a good thing going. I'm just going to keep it going. So the important part is we're going to teach you how to set up the proper structure, the location to store money, the habits. Quite frankly, that's the hardest part, is getting out of our own way so we can do this, because a lot of times we've been conditioned to think that habitual thought process that, again, when we had $20,000 in income and a negative net worth, we have habits that we develop. We have habits that we develop from our parents or those people around us, those people that influenced us when we were young and really had no value and no net worth and no income. But if we really want to grow, we have to start saying, what habits do I need to let go of? And which ones do I need to throw a new rope around and grab and embrace and then take and go to work? So this is the idea that if you have the banking function in your control, it equals control. So if you have the banking function, you know what it is, you have more and more control. And so you can, save money from whatever institution or whatever side of the quadrant you're on. If you're an employee, you can start creating your own banking function. If you're a self-employed person, business owner, or investor, start creating the pool of money that allows you to become the banker in your life and other people's lives. And then when you start borrowing those money to the same type of individuals that you are, a really great example is I had an investor who was flipping houses, and he's tired of flipping houses. It was hard on his body. He was ready to quit. And I said, just take the next profit that you have from the next flip you have. I said, this will change your life. He took that money, the profit from that next flip, he said, this is going to be my pool of money. So we had him put it into his policy. So he has the proper savings, proper environment. And then once he did that, then he says, I'm going to go find other investors because I know what it takes to flip a houses. I know what they're spending on money. I know what they're doing to access dollars. So he went out and found very like-minded people like him, and he was borrowing the money. So he goes, he gets out of the flipping game. He stays in the flipping game, but all he's doing is now having his money work from him. And it took him from about ready to quit because it was just destroying his body. And he was a young guy. He was in his mid-30s. Destroying his body. And he says, now my money's working for me. So I have these other investors that I'm borrowing money to, and they're paying me back, at that time, 15% interest on money. But it took him a little bit of forethought, a little bit of, he had to see this. He had to, believe that was going to be the case. He had to know his marketplace. So it wasn't like it just happens. There is some work you have to do, but it was well worth it because he knew I would say he was almost self-employed. He wasn't really an investor because he owned a job. He owned a job of grinding out, flipping houses. Now he's become a true investor. He has his money working for him. So I guess the biggest point is stop chasing the idea of new money. Take the money that's already flowing through your hands and make it work better for you. New money is great. I'm not saying don't earn new money. Don't bring new money because you can build a bigger pot of money faster if that's what you're going to do. But new money, most people think the way you grow wealth is by bringing in new money, working harder, working more. Quite frankly, that's almost the opposite of what you should be doing. How do we become more efficient with the dollars that we have? How do we become more efficient with the process that we have around money and money conversations? That's really what the conversation is. So the new money that can make you money is the new money that the banking function, the money you inject into other businesses, other self-employed people, other investors. That's how you make money, by the interjection of new money to them. It's your money, but it's new money to them, and they're willing to pay for it. And so when they pay for it, then you come back and say, now I have a business. I have a system. Because this becomes a business owner conversation. If you have a system working for you and people working for you, and quite frankly, you have very few people working for you in the banking function, if you know what you're doing. So let us help you, educate you on how to become that owner or that person that's providing liquidity, doing the banking function, no matter where your customer is at, if they're an employee, if they're self-employed, business owner, or investors. They all need money. They all need injections of capital. And you can be the person that can provide that. And again, you don't have to do it at a huge scale. Your competition isn't Wells Fargo. Your competition is you. Your ability to how you think and where you're going to source your customers at, that's really what your competition is. Your limitation, that is yourself. And you'll grow. I've seen people do this. They're like, I don't know where I'm going to get, if I'm going to do banking, who am I going to lend money to besides myself? Well, you'd be amazed. Once you start thinking about it, those opportunities will appear. I call it the yellow Jeep syndrome. Once you start thinking about, well, who needs money? Who needs capital? Who needs access to dollars? Well, gosh darn, as soon as you start thinking about that, there's going to be a lot of opportunities that you see that you passed over before, that you never even thought about having a conversation with. You're going to go, that caught my ear. Let me talk to you about what we do. And it doesn't have to be anything sophisticated. Quite frankly, the least amount is very unsophisticated if you think about it. All I have to do is say, hey, Bob, you need $10,000, you need $50,000, whatever it is. the bank wants to charge you, or you're putting in your credit card at 22%. Let me finance that at 20%, and we can do it over the next 3 years. You write up you go on the internet anymore, you write up a simple contract, you have make a direct deposit back into your account, and you're good to go. It's a private lending conversation. You don't have to, there's nothing sophisticated about it, right? So I know there's people say, oh, there's regulations. I'm like, oh, there is, but at a certain level, there probably is. Not probably, at a certain level there is. But just, even if you support your own business, this is what I see probably the most. I get real estate investors that they need money all the time at certain times, and they need it fast. But if you can separate, like, I'm the banker, but I'm also the real estate investor, separate the two businesses, because they're two separate businesses, and say, I'm going to lend my real estate investment company $100,000 so we can move quickly on this deal. But that deal has to pay back principal and interest, because my banking business has to be profitable, or quite frankly, even more profitable than my real estate business. So, those are just a couple of examples. It could be complicated if you want it complicated. I'm a simple guy. I just keep it simple. So, just help people understand that the banking function is something that Robert Kiyosaki didn't talk about. I know he didn't do it. He didn't exclude it, but it is something we hadn't thought about. It's like everybody needs access to money to make all those different quadrants work. The question is, where are they going to get it? Where are they going to source those dollars? Is it Wells Fargo, or is it you? Where am I going to source it if I'm an investor, if I'm a business owner? Where am I going to source my money? Do I want to be beholden to Wells Fargo, or would I rather be beholden to my family bank? So, all right. With that, again, do all the things to help us out, to subscribe and share and, give us a like or whatever it is that you need to do. Because again, my marketing guys tells me I got to do that more. Do all that with this video. But more importantly, hear what I'm saying. Let's have a conversation and say, how can you be the person that takes control of your life? How can you be the person that solves the problem that sits in front of you, which is typically lack of passive income, how you want to finance the rest of your life? Do you want to continue to work for your money? Do you want to continue to be self-employed where you own this job? Or do you want to, unlock, a business that, quite frankly, is one of the oldest businesses in the world? Everybody says the second oldest profession in the world, right? But the point is, people need capital. If you can just understand it, it's very simple. If you can be the provider of liquidity, provider of money, then that puts you in control. So, thanks so much for listening. I appreciate you. Talk to you soon.
Grateful to have you tune in today. If you're ready to rethink your financial journey and take the next step, make sure to subscribe. Until next time, stay curious and stay in control.